Welcome back to Madman Review. Ever wondered what you'd do if a mob surrounded your car? Today we're diving into a critical and timely topic. Can you legally use lethal force if you're trapped in your car by an angry mob? Imagine you're driving home, minding your own business, and suddenly find yourself in the middle of chaos. Your car is surrounded, windows are smashed, and you're in immediate danger. How do you defend yourself? In today's video, we'll talk about 10 things to consider whether you can or cannot legally use lethal force if you ever find yourself in a situation where your car is surrounded by an angry mob. Just a quick disclaimer, the info we'll provide in this video is not intended to constitute legal advice. It's for informational and entertainment purposes only. If you need legal advice, talk to your lawyer. And with all that out of the way, let's begin. Mob attacks on cars are now common. On December 29, 2020, a shocking incident unfolded in Manhattan when a group of bicyclists attacked a BMW SUV driven by Max Torgovinnik. He was accompanied by his 74-year-old mother. Surveillance video captured the chaotic scene as the bicyclists surrounded the vehicle, banging on the windows, yelling for them to get out and eventually smashing the windshield. The incident began when one cyclist performing a wheelie crashed into the back of Torgovnik's SUV. This accident triggered a frenzy among the other bicyclists, who dismounted and began aggressively confronting the car. In an effort to avoid escalating the situation, Torgovinnik initially stopped and parked the car. However, the situation deteriorated when the attackers started jumping on the hood and shattered the windshield, causing glass to rain down on them. Fearing for their lives, Torgovinnik made a desperate decision to drive away to protect his mother. So if you were in that guy's situation, scared out of your mind with a gun in hand, would you shoot those bikers? Or maybe you'd think it's better to just hit the gas and run them over to escape. Well, it's not as straightforward as it sounds. There are at least 10 things you need to think about, 5 arguments for lethal force and 5 arguments against it. These considerations cover a range of issues that can make this situation really complex. Let's dive into those 10 points, starting with the arguments for why lethal force might be justified. Argument in favor, number 1, imminent threat. Self-defense laws generally allow for lethal force when you're facing an imminent threat. This means if you genuinely believe that you're about to be seriously harmed or even killed, pulling out a gun or driving through the crowd might be legally defensible. For example, in Texas, the law explicitly states you can use lethal force if you believe it's necessary to protect yourself or others from imminent harm. And in case you're wondering, lethal force isn't just limited to guns. If you used a bladed weapon or your car to run over someone, then you used lethal force. Here's the catch. You have to prove that the threat was real and immediate. It's not enough to just feel scared. There has to be a clear danger that any reasonable person would recognize as life-threatening. Remember that guy from the taqueria we talked about last year? He wasn't charged even though he shot a would-be robber who had a toy gun because the threat seemed real and immediate. Granted, he was in a taqueria, not in a car. So let's now talk about the next argument. Argument in favor number 2, pro-self-defense laws. In many states in the U.S., there's such a thing called the Stand Your Ground law, which allows you to stand your ground and use force to protect yourself. Nevada has similar rules under the Castle Doctrine, which also applies to your vehicle. The idea is that if someone's putting you in immediate danger, you don't have to run away from that person. You can defend yourself as necessary. However, remember that this all hinges on the threat being real and immediate, and danger has to be clear to any reasonable person, not just a gut feeling. If you can prove that, then using lethal force can be justified under these self-defense laws. Argument in favor number 3, defending others. Let's talk about another crucial point, defending others. If you're not alone and you have passengers, especially kids or elderly people, things get even more serious. When their lives are at risk, self-defense laws can justify using lethal force to protect them from immediate harm. It's a big deal because you're not just thinking about your own safety, but also the safety of everyone with you. In a lot of states, if someone else is in your vehicle is in immediate danger, you have the right to use deadly force to protect them. This is part of the broader self-defense laws in stand your ground states, which don't require you to retreat if you're somewhere you legally have the right to be. Like your car. If your passengers are in clear danger, like if the mob trying to break in and harm them, lethal force could be considered necessary and justified. This isn't just about protecting property, it's about safeguarding lives. So if you're in that scenario, knowing that the law supports your right to defend others can be crucial. Argument in favor number 4, stand your ground law. Diving deeper into the stand your ground law, if you're in a car and a mob surrounds you and you genuinely believe your life is in danger, you don't have to back down or try to flee. You can stand your ground and use the necessary force to protect yourself, but you have to prove that the threat was reasonably believable. Key factor here is the reasonableness of the threat. If a reasonable person in your situation would believe they're facing immediate danger of serious injury or death, using lethal force can be justified. This principle is recognized in many states and provides a legal backing for defending yourself in these intense scenarios. However, it's crucial to remember that while stand your ground laws provide robust protections, they also come with significant legal scrutiny. Your belief that deadly force was necessary must be reasonable and provable in court. This means you'll need to articulate why you felt in immediate danger and that your actions were justified under the circumstances. Argument in favor number 5, Castle Doctrine. This time, let's dive deeper into the Castle Doctrine. In many jurisdictions, this doctrine isn't just limited to your home, it can also extend to your vehicle. Castle Doctrine allows individuals to use lethal force to defend against intruders or attackers when they're in their car. Essentially, your car is considered an extension of your home, giving you the right to protect yourself and others inside it with deadly force if necessary. This means if someone tries to forcefully enter your car or threatens you with serious harm while you're inside, you do have the legal right to use lethal force to defend yourself. The Castle Doctrine dictates that your vehicle is your personal space and you shouldn't have to retreat or flee when faced with an imminent threat. Crucial aspect of the Castle Doctrine is that it emphasizes the right to stand your ground in a place where you have the legal right to be. If an attacker poses a serious threat to your safety or the safety of your passengers, you can respond with appropriate force. This legal protection acknowledges that there are times you just can't safely escape a dangerous situation, and defending yourself might be the only option. Now that we're done talking about the arguments that justify the use of lethal force, let's now look at arguments against it. Argument against number 1, property damage alone. If the mob isn't directly threatening your life or causing serious bodily harm, pulling out a gun or using deadly force is not legally defensible. As I said earlier, under self-defense laws, legal force is reserved for situations where there's an imminent threat to your life or the lives of others. Property damage, while stressful and potentially dangerous, doesn't meet this threshold. While your car is being damaged is certainly a serious issue, doesn't justify taking someone's life. Many states have specific statutes that outline when lethal force can be used, and protecting property is not enough. So if the mob's not just kicking your car, using lethal force can be seen as excessive and not proportionate to the threat. It's crucial to remember that responding to property damage with lethal force can lead to severe legal consequences. Even in states with strong self-defense laws, proving that the use of deadly force was necessary to protect property alone is an uphill battle. Argument against number 2, duty to retreat law. Let's now talk about the duty to retreat law, which is the exact opposite of the stand your ground law. This is a big deal in some states. The idea here is that if you can safely avoid using deadly force by retreating, you're legally required to do so. If there's a clear and safe way to escape from the situation, the law expects you to take it. In states without stand your ground laws, this duty to retreat can significantly impact whether your using lethal force is justified. For example, in places like New York or Massachusetts, if you're able to drive away from a threatening mob safely, you need to do that instead of using a firearm. The law views the use of deadly force as a last resort, only permissible when there's no other option to avoid imminent danger. Courts will look at whether you had the opportunity to retreat and if taking that chance would have kept you safe without escalating the violence, and you chose to escalate the violence anyway, then you're out of luck. Argument against number 3, proportional response. Next up is proportionality of force. In self-defense situations, the force you use has to match the threat you're facing. So, if a mob isn't posing a deadly threat to you, using lethal force could be seen as overkill and not legally justified. If someone's just banging on your car or yelling at you, pulling out a gun, or driving through the crowd could be considered excessive. The courts will look at whether the threat was serious enough to justify such a severe response. If the mob isn't trying to kill or seriously harm you, using deadly force can land you in hot water legally. This is a fundamental part of self-defense law across many states. Whether you're in a stand your ground state or a duty to retreat state, your use of force must still be proportional to the threat. Argument against number 4, legal headaches. Another important consideration is the possibility of a lawsuit. Even if you're absolutely sure you acted in self-defense, you could still run into some serious legal troubles. After such an incident, law enforcement and prosecutors might dig deep to see if the force you used was necessary. They might even hit you with a manslaughter or murder charges if they think you went overboard. Imagine using a gun against a mob that seemed intent on killing you by smashing your car window. If the prosecution can twist it to look like they weren't really going to do that, you could end up behind bars. If they can convince the jury that you overreacted or that the threat wasn't as severe as you perceived, your defense might not hold up. Argument against number 5, subjective and objective reasonableness. And finally, let's talk about how courts evaluate the reasonableness of using lethal force. This involves both subjective and objective tests. Subjectively, the court looks at whether you genuinely believed you were in imminent danger. Objectively, it examines whether a reasonable person in the same situation would have felt the need to use lethal force. This dual test can make your defense more complicated. Even if you felt terrified and acted out of fear, the jury must agree that your reaction was what any reasonable person would have done under the same circumstances. Depending on your luck, you might find it tough to convince the jury assigned to your case that your actions were justified. But as the saying goes, better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.